Okay, today's class we are finishing up topic 3 and we're going to look at sexual reproduction in animals. Um, so there's many different strategies, many different reproductive strategies like how to find a mate and so on. But the basic requirements is that for sexual reproduction to occur in animals, both the male gametes, which are the sperm cells, and the female gametes, which are the egg cells or the ova, they have to arrive in the same place at the same time for fertilization to occur. Once fertilization occurs, that first um, that first cell right after fertilization, that's still called a zygote, and this zygote requires specific conditions in order to develop. It has to have nutrients there, moisture, warmth, and protection. All right, so fertilization, again, just like when we were talking about in plants, it's still the union of the sperm cell with the egg cell, and the first cell created is still called the zygote, just like we saw in plants. All right, so the zygote is the first cell created by the joining of the sperm cell and the egg cell. After that, the zygote is going to continue dividing, and that process is called cleavage, right here in bold. So that cleavage is that process where cell divisions will continue to occur. Those continued cell divisions will eventually result in a new multicellular life form, and now it's called an embryo. So again, bolded right here. All right, so male gamete, female gamete unite, fertilization occurs, it forms a zygote. The zygote will continue to divide with a process called cleavage, and then an embryo is what that cell is called now. It's a multicellular life form called an embryo. Okay, that embryo will continue to develop either inside the female parent or outside in an egg. The new offspring, that baby or that individual, will have characteristics of both the female and male parent, but will not be identical to either parent. So if we look at this diagram, all right, so here we have embryo development. So we have the sperm cell right here, and we have the egg cell right there. Okay, fertilization has occurred. This is now fertilized. The first cell here is called the zygote, and now we will have cleavage occurring where cell division occurs repeatedly. You don't need to know these names here. You need to know that an embryo is formed. All right, so in sexual reproduction in animals, there is two types of fertilization. There's external fertilization and there's internal fertilization. So let's talk about external fertilization first. So this occurs in animals such as sponges, worms, many fish, amphibians, where fertilization is occurring outside the female. So the example here, like frogs. When frogs mate, both the males and the females, they will release their gametes into the water at the same time. So it's very important that they have a liquid environment so that the gametes do not dry out. All right, so one of the requirements here is to have a moist environment for the gametes to survive. Also, the lifespans of gametes are short. So the release of the eggs and the sperm, it has to be carefully timed so that the sperm and egg are able to meet and get fertilized. So the liquid environment gives sperm a fluid to basically swim through to reach the egg. Other disadvantages here with external fertilization are things like predators. Predators may eat the gametes. Water currents, they may sweep the gametes away from each other. If there's weather conditions that aren't favorable, so if there's extreme temperatures, maybe if there's pollutants lack of oxygen, those kind of things can destroy the gametes as well. But a way to counteract that is there's a lot of gametes produced. So there's a large number of gametes produced so that at least some of them will be able to survive. All right, once fertilization does occur, the zygotes will then develop in that water environment. Just a couple figures here. So here in frogs, you have the female here, the male here on top, and basically the male is on top of the female and just kind of squeezes the female, which will release her eggs. Then the male will release the sperm into the environment, into that watery environment, and then hopefully fertilization will occur. Here as well, we see external fertilization in some fish species. The female fish lays the eggs, and then the male fish is basically waiting to spread, release his sperm, and then spread the sperm over the eggs, and hopefully fertilization can occur. All right, next is internal fertilization. Okay, so with internal fertilization, internal fertilization is occurring within or inside the body of the female, a much higher rate of successful fertilizations or reproductive success, right? Because the egg cells are protected inside the body of the female parent. The conditions are already going to be warm and moist, okay? And that moist environment, again, is important because it helps that sperm cell to swim to the egg. All right, so they usually have this flagellated, it's like the tail, which allows the sperm cell to swim. All right, so in internal fertilization, sperm is being deposited inside the female's body, and the sperm is able to then move almost directly towards the egg. So risks to the survival of the gametes are greatly reduced. It removes the dangers of like harsh climates, possible predators, and it's already going to be a warm and a moist environment so that the gametes can survive. All right, so advantages of sexual reproduction, whether it's external or internal, advantages of sexual reproduction is that it provides a lot of variation because the offspring is getting characteristics from both the male and female parent. Okay, and that variation, like we've talked about in the first couple of topics, is very important because it helps the species to survive in case there was a extreme environmental change. So disadvantages of sexual reproduction. So one, it takes a lot of energy. Also, the time to find a mate or to make sure that the eggs and sperm are released at the same time. Another disadvantage is it's going to produce smaller populations.
Enduring questions of humanity is, what is the meaning of life? Well, spoiler alert, we won't be answering all of your existential questions today. But as far as evolution is concerned, the most important thing that animals can do is make more of these. No, not just the babies. Genes. Without passing down our DNA through sexual reproduction, there would be no adorable spring baby bears, no beetles, no us. Sexual reproduction is part of the very definition of what it means to be an animal, even though life has found other more efficient methods of reproducing, like cloning, which just takes one individual. Most living animals, and the last shared ancestor of all animals, pass on their genetic makeup with sexual reproduction. I'm Raywyn Grant, and this is Crash Course Zoology. Let's lay down some ground rules because sexual reproduction is complicated. All animals have some sort of biological sex, which is harder to define than you'd think because it's a combination of our DNA, hormones, and physical characteristics. Unlike other animals, humans can also have a separate concept called gender, which involves how people can view themselves in the context of our society and culture. Today, our focus will be on non-human animals. We'll use male for animals that produce reproductive cells or gametes that don't take a lot of energy to make, like sperm, and female for animals that produce high-energy investment gametes, like eggs. And sexual reproduction is a process that happens when male and female gametes fuse to form offspring, combining the genetic material of both parents. Non-human animals whose biological sex characteristics don't fit the male-female binary are hermaphroditic. We'll talk about hermaphroditic animals to refer to the many non-human animals that can produce both types of gametes throughout their lives, like earthworms, land snails, or our old friend C. elegans, the nematode. Binaries like yes or no, or male or female, are actually pretty rare in nature. So let's start by sorting through the puzzle pieces of biological sex, which varies across animals. It's a combination of a lot of biological signals and structures that make sperm, eggs, or both, or neither. Genetically, various biological instructions made of DNA, called genes, influence animals' biological sex. And in many species, these genes, along with plenty of other non-sex genes, are found on allosomes, or one particular pair of chromosomes, which are big chunks of DNA. Like some animals, including humans, have an XY sex determination system. We don't all share the exact same X and Y chromosomes, but similar allosome combinations produce similar biological sex characteristics. So in the XY system, individuals that get two of the same allosomes produce high investment gametes and are called female. And individuals with two different allosomes produce low investment gametes and are called male. Other animals evolved a ZW sex determination system. Here, biologists picked different letters because the patterns work differently. Animals with two different allosomes produce eggs and are called females, and males producing sperm have two Zs. And to be clear, not all Z or W chromosomes are the same across animal species either, just like not all X's and Y's are the same. ZW, XY, and other chromosome systems evolved independently multiple times from different non-sex chromosomes throughout animal evolution. Like the X0 sex determination system, which shows up in our friends C. elegans, the nematode, and C. elegans, the tarantula. This system only has one type of allosome, and biological sex is determined by how many copies the animal gets. Males get just one X, and individuals with XX are female or hermaphroditic, depending on the species. Very efficient. But like I said, genetics is only one piece of the biological sex puzzle. For some animals, the environment they happen to be in as they develop plays a bigger role than genetics. The most famous example is temperature-dependent sex determination, which shows up in some reptiles and fish. Under normal conditions, some parts of the nest are cooler than others, and a mix of males and females hatch. But if the nest is too hot or too cold, even by just a few degrees, we get only one sex. All of the animals we've talked about so far, whether their biological sex is determined by their genetics or their environment, stay one sex. But many animals are serially hermaphroditic and switch which type of gamete they produce based on cues in their environment. Let's live a day in the life of one of the most famous examples. Allow me to introduce the clownfish. Our clownfish is the largest male and leads his small group with his mate, the female fish. Cued by the moon, these two are the only ones to reproduce, laying their eggs on a flat surface near their anemone. The father takes good care of his eggs, fanning them with his fins and chasing off predators. Like all other clownfish, our clownfish began life as an undifferentiated juvenile, who are neither truly male nor female because they don't make gametes and don't mate with the leader fish. He spent his early years tending to his anemone home. But even big, dominant clownfish don't live forever, and every once in a while the largest female gets eaten by a predator or dies of natural causes. Losing their only reproductively active female would be a disaster for the fitness of the colony, but our clownfish has a creative solution. He grows rapidly and his biology changes, taking her place as the largest female. The largest juvenile then moves up and becomes a sexually mature male and mates with the new female leader. The new breeding pair takes over the colony and starts having their own eggs. Finding Nemo would have been a very different movie if it were 100% scientifically accurate. Have a nice day, clownfish. So animals can end up producing different gametes based on their genetics, their environment, and even what their social group needs to survive. But the challenges of sexual reproduction are just getting started. To get their gametes together, animals still have to find mates and do the whole sperm and egg combining thing. To help them find mates, lots of insects have special sensory organs. Like the male silk moth has huge, bushy, super sensitive antennae that can sense chemical signals from female moths from nearly 3 miles away. Other animals, like deep-sea anglerfish who live in the vast, empty deep sea, are very clingy once they find a mate. The male latches onto his mate and doesn't let go, eventually fusing with her body and providing her with a reliable supply of sperm. Once an animal knows where its potential mate is, the next step is to get there and actually combine gametes, which for some animals, like those with a rooted-in-place lifestyle, is a lot more complicated than it looks. One strategy is to let the gametes do most of the traveling. Like once a year, when the moon and water temperature are just right, entire colonies of coral reefs release their eggs and sperm into the ocean, creating an underwater blizzard of gametes. Once animals needed to mate on land, many evolved a system where the gametes meet inside one of the individuals, since they couldn't count on their gametes floating in water anymore, which requires the animal producing the low investment gamete, like sperm, to have an intromittent organ to deliver those gametes. Like spiders use their pedipalps, their chemosensitive front limbs. Although their testes containing the sperm are all the way in the back of their abdomen, so they have to first put their sperm on the ground and then pick it up again with their palps before being ready to mate. Besides the actual logistics, many animals also have to contend with convincing a member of the opposite sex to be their mate. This is where sexually selected traits, or traits that affect an individual's ability to mate, come into play. Like antlers to fight off rivals, or brightly colored ornaments, or an impressive song to attract a mate. Many of these traits show up only in males, because typically the sex that has to invest more time and energy into reproducing gets to choose the mate. And often that's females, since eggs take more energy to make. So in many species, females choose mates. But it's the opposite in seahorses, some spiders, and others where only males protect the eggs. That's assuming offspring are the goal. For offspring to be produced, both high and low investment gametes are needed, but that's not the only mate pairing we see in nature. Same-sex sexual behavior happens all across the animal kingdom and has been observed in 1,000 species and counting. In fact, it could be an evolutionary adaptation passed down from a common ancestor. Like red flower beetles engage in same-sex behavior where 2 males will couple with each other. And we think this behavior helps the beetles get rid of old, low-quality sperm. Lots of social animals like dolphins and bonobos engage in same-sex sexual behavior too, which may help maintain bonds within their group. Whatever gametes you have, the whole process of sexual reproduction is complicated, messy, inefficient, and even dangerous. So we might wonder, why haven't we evolved something better? Actually, some animals have evolved to reproduce asexually, where sex isn't needed to make offspring. But these species are way outnumbered by sexually reproducing animals, which suggests that sex is evolutionarily better. We're still exploring why that is, but there are lots of interesting hypotheses, including two big ideas, all about shuffling genes around. Since sexual reproduction results in offspring with a mostly random combination
I
of
need you to be
genes from the
quiet.
parents, it increases the genetic diversity, or the number of unique combination of genes in a population. This can prevent harmful gene mutations from becoming widespread and might lead to potentially helpful combinations of other mutations. But there's also the Red Queen hypothesis. Mixing and matching genes through sexual reproduction might be super important for evolving defenses against external factors like parasites, viruses, and disease-causing bacteria. But since these threats are also constantly evolving, animals are locked into sexual reproduction just to keep up. And at the end of the day, the work of sexual reproduction isn't really over. Many animals put a lot of time and energy raising their fused gametes into fully developed offspring by feeding, protecting, and even teaching their babies until they can take care of themselves, sometimes with substantial costs. But all that effort is worth it to pass their genes down to the next generation. Sexual reproduction is one of the 4 key parts of being an animal, so it's maybe not so surprising that animals do all sorts of interesting things to make it happen. Next episode, we'll keep with the theme of animals interacting with other animals by covering how they work together in colonies and societies to do things they couldn't do alone. Thanks for watching this episode of Crash Course Zoology, which was produced by Complexly in partnership